Hello, welcome again to this course. This is course number 5 on communication. What a funny topic to have. But remember, the book that we're following is Christian Leadership, especially in the secular world. And their titles might not be biblical, but the meaning can be found in the Bible. In terms of communication, you're saying, what do we cover about what we talk about? Because communication, as you study in this course and read out on the book, is everything. It's everything about telling one thing to another person. The gospel is a communication, and relationships are communication, and to be able to be a leader, whether to 10, 100,000, 100,000 or million, is communication, is the ability to communicate. Our whole society builds around communication. As you know, the spread of the internet and our modern mass media and inventions is because of communication. And the reason why the internet is so popular is people found a new way of communicating, a shorter and fastest way. And the reason some of these other new inventions like phones and other things working well is because people have found new ways to communicate. And so communication is the undergirding, it is the foundation to relationships. If God didn't communicate with us, would we know He loves us? If we did communicate to God, of course God can read us, but we can't read God. If we couldn't communicate to one another, would we know that we love one another? If we didn't communicate to one another, would husbands and wives know they love each other? Would families know about their love for one another? If we didn't communicate, we can't teach. There is no master and disciples. So communication is everything. As we look at communication, we also want to focus on the fact that in communicating and the importance of communication, that's a given, but we can see some areas why it's important, as we're going to do in this study. The other area is, what do we actually communicate? And then the question of, who do we communicate it to? In our modern world, the advertising media is spending millions and billions of dollars communicating to target audiences. Even the internet today, which is getting more and more the advertisement, is communication. They're trying to communicate and advertise what they have so people will buy. The whole mass media is being communication. So what do we communicate? What's the target audience? And although we do not use words like target audience, which is a target evangelism group, behind it there's a reality. Wasn't it true that when God sent Peter as an apostle to the Jews, and God sent Paul as an apostle to the Gentiles, that was target communication? That God would bring to the Gentiles a specialized apostle who, interestingly, was trained to communicate to the Jews, but yet he was the best one. Because the Gentiles, symbolized by the Greek philosophers, they want knowledge, they want reasoning, they want to know. And so God knew that Paul would be able to communicate that kind of message so much better than would Peter. Because by the time Peter was sent to the Jews were knowledgeable people. They were not like the Gentiles. They were brought up on the Torah. They were brought up reading, memorizing. So all they needed to do was to point the way, the direction. So God does have His interesting choices as to who are the communicators and a message to communicate. The message that Peter communicated to the Jews was definitely different from the message Paul communicated to the Gentiles. And as you can see in the whole book of Acts, that as Peter was preaching to the Jews, Paul was being prepared to preach to the Gentiles. At some point, the Jewish and the Gentile gospel diverged. From Acts 1, 2, 3, 4, it started diverging. There were little bit of bumps along the road. You see in Acts 10 when Paul went to Cornelius, and Acts 11 when he's confronted for going to Cornelius' house, and then you found Acts 13 the beginning of fully Gentile church almost by accident. Why by accident? Perhaps they might not have gone to the Gentiles if there was no persecution. So God knows, and He brings forth all these people. And so the gospel to the Gentiles began to develop its unique flavor. And the gospel to the Jews developed its unique flavor, where they would even keep Jewish laws, become like a Jew, outwardly everything like a Jew, but inwardly a Christian. We see an example of such synthesis in Paul's life when he confronted disciples like Timothy in the book of Acts 16. Timothy was a half. His mother was a Jew, his father was a Gentile. He was not brought up as a Jew apparently, because when Paul met him, he was a leader of the Gentile church. And Paul looked at this person, Timothy. Shall he make him a Gentile or a Jew? Communication. So Paul knew that if Timothy was a Gentile, he still could communicate, was a Jew, he still could communicate to the Gentile. But if Timothy were just a Gentile, the Jews would never accept him. And guess what Paul did? The same Paul who says, do not get circumcised, who rebuked the Gentiles who ever thinking of circumcision and going to the Lord. That same Paul in Acts 16 circumcised Timothy. In other words, he made him a Jew so that the Jews could accept him. And Timothy had a ministry to the Jews and the Gentiles. Will this be communication? Yes, indeed, communication in style and in character. And because Timothy has to go through whatever he went through, the painful adult circumcision, just for the sake of Paul. So in this manner, we see communication, very important in the Bible. Finally, it began to converge where the Gentile church and the Jewish church had to find a synthesis. That's where we have Acts 15. Because it looks like there was two gospels, not one. One to the Gentiles, one to the Jews. But after Acts 15, there was only one gospel. They both agree on the basics, and they knew the message to communicate. So it's important to have the right message. Sometimes the right message comes together after a lot of debate, like they did in Acts 15, a lot of trials by some who brought it all the way, and the right message removes some of the extreme people immediately. I'm sure there were Judaizers who disagree with Acts 15 and their conclusion. They were cut off from the church. And in that manner, we also have a history that you have in this lesson, where Martin Luther learned to communicate. If you read the history of Martin Luther, and if you didn't read it, you hear, oh, Martin Luther, Reformation. Do you know that the power of the pen was used by him? He wrote and he wrote and he wrote. And the Reformation message spread all over by the power of the written word. If without the written word, who would have heard of Martin Luther? In fact, before Martin Luther, there was a guy called Savonarola. And at that time, he was a mighty preacher, mighty revival. But he didn't have a prince backing him, nor did he have the distribution of the printed matter like Martin Luther had. And so in that manner, we see here that in our modern communication, how we communicate to TV, to radio, and the target audience, all this must be a consideration of all ministries. Whether it be small ministries, big ministries, mega, whatever. Examine the message, examine the method, and of course, we must make sure that both the end and the means are one. The end never justify the means. They must both be anointed in the Lord. Amen.